We're going to go ahead and get started, and I'll just hand it off to you so you can go. Yeah.
Well, good afternoon to everyone. It's very nice to be here. It's always great to be at the National Press Club and to be a guest of the Government Blockchain Association. I will say in advance, I would very much appreciate that you do honor the rules of the National Press Club, which is to be masked. It may not be important for you, but it is important for me. Thank you. Okay. So I have a very broad topic here, and I understand there hasn't been a lot of foundation set with respect to the structure of the approach of laws and regulations, especially in the United States, but really worldwide. I decided the best way to start out here, a couple of things we need to sort of establish. And the first is with respect to the securities laws. Are they under assault, or is crypto under assault? Now, I should probably ask that question. How many of you believe the securities laws are under assault? How many of you believe that it's crypto itself that's under assault? Okay. And I'd like to engage, and we'll come back and engage a little bit more in conversation on that point. But bottom line is that we have new technologies. We've got the issues around creation of new products and new services and the people to whom they're being sold and where they're being sold. You know, no longer is the marketplace just a local marketplace, a countrywide marketplace. It's global. Push the button with respect to crypto and you're in every country, every jurisdiction in the world instantly. And there are issues around how they're held, who's going to hold them, who's going to manage them. And then we've got the age-old question of disclosures, and we'll come back to that in a bit. But also, one of the things that this technology is brought to us is a new way of governance. We're just on the very front end of figuring out how we interact with each other, with our other investors, with our other participants, using technology where code is the dictating force. And then I put on there the last end. Has anyone heard of the dividend? I don't see a single hand go up. First Bitcoin crypto declared dividend of a public company. Which is yet another new face of where we're going. So I think what we run into, and I'm going to focus on the US perspective, is that our securities laws, and the SEC's mandate in particular, is investor protection. So what does that mean? Who are we protecting? And then also ensuring the functioning of the markets. Now, clearly, this technology has disrupted many things on many kinds of levels. And we're trying to sort through those right now. I think often, and I'm going to be critical on both sides of the table, is I think often the crypto space doesn't necessarily fully appreciate the laws and regulations that have been developed over time and what the purposes of those laws and regulations are. Then I can tell you from the perspective of one securities regulator that I know well, who made the comment, at the end of the day, let's say that it's not a currency, that it's not an insurance product, and it's not anything else, and something goes wrong. Who is the holder of that crypto asset going to come to? They're going to go to the securities regulators, because the way the securities laws in the United States are set up, it's really a catch-all. So if it's not protected anywhere else, our securities laws provide a soft landing at the very least. So I would like people to understand that from the beginning in terms of the comments that I'm going to be making. And I'm not sure this is functioning quite right. Okay, so what are we talking about here? And I want to, again, sort of level set because I know there hasn't been a lot of conversation about what we're really talking about here. We're talking about blockchain and cryptocurrencies, but what are really cryptocurrencies? Cryptocurrencies really break down into, I would say they're crypto assets is the way we're really referring to them these days and the way we need to think about them. And they break down to a number of different categories, and God knows that, you know, in the not too distant future, we may be adding some other categories there. But as they've fleshed out in the last several years, we've got the native currencies. Those currencies, cryptocurrencies that are native to the blockchain on which they are developed or associated with, or whatever, however you want to use the phrase. But Bitcoin, Ethereum, and so on. Then we've got this class of tokens, and largely fueled by the development of the RC20 token standard on the Ethereum blockchain. But tokens have become very much part of the world that we live in. And the tokens were what that fueled the fire of the initial coin offerings, the ICOs in the 2017 timeframe. But they break down to a number of categories, and I've caught a few. The security tokens, you know, at one point, our Securities Exchange Commissioner, or Chairman, SEC Chairman, said that in his mind, there really wasn't a single token out there that wasn't a security. Many people like to argue that this is what we're dealing with is a utility. That the token has utility and it shouldn't be looked at as a security. And there's a lot of fine lines we'll break down. But the other is that we've seen this sort of category of payment token that's emerged as well. And when we get into the payment token area, we get into a little bit fuzzier conversation around our money transmitter licensing laws as well. But then we've got this world of stablecoins. So my guess is, how many of you are crypto holders in this room of some form or another? Well, I was expecting that probably you're getting fairly close to that 100% in audiences like this. How many of you own a stable coin? Okay, so many of you do. How many of you have used a stable coin in the past to facilitate your transactions? They're pretty useful, right? They allow you to know what the value of your investment is, the value of what you're holding today, and to know that if you use it tomorrow, it's going to have that same value. And if you're playing it right, you're going to sell high off of one cryptocurrency, go into a stable coin, and then wait for adjustments in the market or go find something else that's a nice price point. But stable coins have some real functionality, and we're seeing more and more of that be built out every day. Instant settlement, global settlements, regardless of what clock we're on, New York or Singapore or wherever. Central bank digital currencies. I know you had a presentation this morning on that subject, but that's another type of maybe not pure crypto asset, it depends on how it's being developed, but certainly a digital asset. And then we start to go into the never land of DeFi. Now, what is DeFi? And where do crypto assets fit into that? Well, DeFi makes the use of your crypto assets much more powerful and gives you earning opportunities around it. And then we've got the DAOs, which is another overlay on the world that we live in. And that's a decentralized autonomous organization, which these are coming together more and more. I'm certain that Gerard's got some idea for DAO in his mind in connection with the GBA activities. But it's another form of people coming together and pooling resources and being able to find a way to deploy them. And then finally, NFTs. And I will confess that I'm spending a great deal of time in the NFT world today because that's where a great deal of effort is going. And what are NFTs? And I'll just leave it with you right now. Almost everything we've had on that list before that probably can fit into an NFT category in some way or another, but we'll get back to that. But bottom line is, in the US in particular, we regulate by function. So when we take that list on the left-hand side and look at all those different kinds of crypto assets, at the end of the day, we're really looking at what the function of that crypto asset is. And that function is going to determine the regulatory scheme under which we're going to be operating. So if it's a currency, a pure currency, up until 2017 or so, the only real regulatory scheme we knew was money transmitter regulation at the state level. But then the SEC became more and more involved. The CFTC takes care of a number of our issues on there. And I think the real issue today that we're wrestling with is what do you do about the utility token, the token that's truly used for a purpose to make something work. Okay, so the next question is, I've already said a lot. Why does this matter to us? Well, let me offer this up, is that and this is thanks to Cornerstone research, is the SEC enforcement activity from 2013 through 2021. SEC brought a total of 97 cryptocurrency-related litigations and administrative proceedings, 10 delinquent filing orders, 20 suspension orders, and a number of subpoenas and follow-on administrative proceedings. At the end of the 2021, the SEC had imposed $2.3 billion in total monetary penalties against digital asset market participants. What this doesn't reflect is the fact that they probably put a lot more subpoenas out than well, it says 97, or no, it doesn't, it just says a number, than the 97 prosecutions that they had. For example, if you look at the John McAfee indictment, there were at least 10 projects there, I think maybe only one of which ever went to an SEC proceeding, but were all recognized to be involved securities, which is why he was charged, as you can see in the on the side column, with his promotional activities before his untimely death. This doesn't take into account what's happened at the state level, because we have mirror laws and regulations at the state level that empower the state securities commissioners, and there's one in every state, to be able to take action when they see a problem. And they have been very active, and I can't tell you offhand, I should have checked before I came today, what the total cases they've brought, but I would say it's at least double, if not triple, the number that we've seen altogether. Now, does that account for all of the ICOs that happened back in the 2017, early 18 time period before things sort of settled down because we had clearer enunciation from the SEC that, yeah, we were probably going to act against you? No, and why? Because many of the cases that are out there, many of these ICOs went belly up. The number's something like 97, 98, 99% of the ICOs that happened in the 2017-18 time period, those projects no longer exist. Now think about that for a minute. What does that mean from an investor protection standpoint? What does that mean to the little guy who has no idea when they read a white paper of what they're reading, has no idea what the technological innovation means? I think that's what we really need to be thinking about. And I know this is going to be highly critical, and I know that there are people all over the world that are listening right now, but I think we lose sight of the fact that we do have laws and regulations in place to provide a baseline of protection. The administration may not be perfect, and I use small a administration in this case. But these laws are there for a purpose. And as the regulators will say, we've got to do something at some point because they're going to come complaining to us anyway. Now, do we leave it then to the plaintiff's bar? To leave it to the private sector to bring the actions? We saw a lot of that in the early days, but not as much activity now because the dollars are just not there for them to pursue. So what do we use as a watchdog? So it's great to talk theoretically about opening the markets up worldwide and letting the small investor come in. But what's going to happen to that small investor's money? Yes, what is it, 1 in 10, 1 in 20, 1 in 30, 100 projects actually go somewhere? So I'll leave you with that thought for right now. Okay, so what are we dealing with? Why is this a security? I don't know. I'm guessing that many of you have already heard the phrase Howie test. This was the outcome of a Supreme Court decision that's now, I don't know, 70, 80 years old. I guess 60, 70, whatever. But it was an enunciation around investments in an orange grove, and I'm not going to go into all the details. But there were four. The issue is whether the people were buying an investment contract, and the Supreme Court set out four factors as key points. Is there an investment of money? Is it a common enterprise? Is there an expectation of profit? And is it relying solely upon the efforts of others? I'm not going to go into great detail on this because we could go down a lot of rabbit holes real fast on it, but I will draw your attention to a document that the SEC put out in 2019, which really went into each one of these elements. And when you're looking at a project, or you're thinking about putting together a project, or you're looking at somebody else's project, for each one of these factors, they give you a lot of things to think about. One of them is, is the project itself taking efforts to get itself listed on an exchange to create a secondary market? Is that something that would be typical for a project that's not intended for investment purposes? So again, we can talk at great length about that, but let's move on because we've got a lot of other things to talk about. So how do we get here? I'd like to go back the other way. There we go. So, in the beginning we had Bitcoin. That was a native currency. It was followed by, we had our first ICO, initial coin offering, and as I've always said, if you want to call attention to yourself, use something that sounds like something else. So what does ICO stand like? It sounds like an IPO. And how do we regulate IPOs? We regulate them through the securities laws. But in any case, the first one, believe it or not, was in 2013. Followed shortly thereafter with the Ethereum launch. And we'll come back to that in a minute. And then things really exploded in 2017. There's a great graph put together by a company that shows the funding going into ICOs, and I should have included it because it's incredibly telling that it starts with a very small little dot, and over the months of 2017, that little dot becomes huge and then starts to break out into all sorts of geographies around the world. So we had a couple of things going on, and it was, this is a bad word to use in this day and age, but it was a truly viral thing that was happening, and it was happening globally. And what were we seeing more and more? The original plans like Bitcoin, Ethereum to a certain extent, and a number of the blockchains, they were creating something and creating something of value, but they realized early on, hey, we can make some money in the process if we're mining them first and we get to market first with them. And so that sort of then morphed into anybody who had any kind of project that had any kind of technology associated with it, or even if it didn't, they decided they would come up with a token. And suddenly we had this absolute explosion of token offerings. And what were they being used for the most part? To raise funds for the ongoing development of the projects. The investors, when they bought them, and yes, they were investors, were buying them with the expectation that they would go up in price. Now, someone who would walk, and back in those days, I wasn't a prospective client that didn't walk into my office, yes, we were still in person at that point, and say, I'm going to do a token offering, but mine's a utility token. It's not a security. Well, as I said, the SEC chairman subsequently had a very telling comment along those lines, and that was usually the response that I gave the clients too. Looks like a security. The other aspects, I said, these are traded on exchanges. So that's sort of how we got to where we are. But interestingly enough, in 2000, and I believe it was 18, and this shows you how much your mind. There we go. Have any of you seen this website before? Oh wow, it's a virgin crowd here. I believe it was it was either May of 2018 or May of 2019. I think it was May of 2019. At the big dance in the crypto space, the Consensus Conference in New York City. Midday, this suddenly becomes the hot topic on everybody's phone. This was released, the Howie coin. Well, guess who released the Howie coin? This was done by the SEC, the United States Securities Exchange Commission. Build a website. and it built a website to launch an ICO. And the intent of the website was basically to show people, help people understand what they were looking at and understand what was real and what wasn't real. I think our battery needs to be changed here. But it had all the elements. If you were watching, looking at ICOs back in that day, it had all the elements of how these things became a real industry on how to market and sell and drive acceptance of an ICO, how to get them listed on get the token listed on an exchange and so on. Well, so the SEC really did this as sort of it was a training tool or a education tool. Well, wouldn't you know it? There were ICO projects that went and downloaded the SEC Howie coin and used it as a model for their own projects. And I have to say that this slide in particular caught me a little bit off guard because 20 minutes before the SEC release hit my phone, I had met with a woman who looked just like the second woman in the slide there with the purple or yes, whatever color her hair is. And I was like, whoa, were they, what did they know at the time? But in any case, so this is just showing these became very formulaic. You had to understand, but most people couldn't get to the bottom of what was there because the real sauce of what it wasn't happening. But ICOs ended up getting such a bad name, so what do? So you change the name, right? Rebrand. I'm not allowed to mention company names, but we know how some companies have changed their names in the wake of controversy. So what do we have? We've got the security token offering. We got the initial exchange offering. So we had the STO, we have the IEO, and that's sort of where we are today. And these deals are happening. If they're happening in the United States, the way they happen in the United States is that they're sold to accredited investors. So we're doing it within the context of the laws, under an exemption under Reg D. I don't think there's anyone who's yet fully come forward to register a public offering, and I probably, for those of you who are listening online, I look forward to you showing me the ways of my error on this comment. But in any case, in the United States, there are two primary ways that companies can go forward. One is with a Reg D for accredited investor only option, and the other is a Reg S where it's sold outside the United States, not to US residents. Otherwise, if it's to be sold to retail investors, non-accredited investors in the United States, we still have the registration process that applies to publicly issued offerings. And what we have seen over time is we've seen exchanges around the world, platforms around the world who have offered these tokens to people. Now, what have they had to do? They have to make adjustments. So in the US, we see a set of markets that have evolved, the ATSs, as we call them, which will facilitate trading of these kinds of tokens amongst accredited investors. And then we have some of the biggest exchanges in the world, as you can see from this list, who will list these tokens for buying and selling, but for people located outside the United States. Raises a really interesting compliance issue, because how do you ring fence and make sure that US residents aren't participating in it? And so we've seen a lot of development of so-called KYC tools, know your customer, that would help sort through these geospatial issues. So I won't leave this discussion without a mention of the Ripple case, which I won't ask for a show of hands on how many people have heard about Ripple. But what I can say is Ripple is one of the oldest existing cryptocurrencies in the US. A lot of people are not aware of the fact that Ripple was the subject of a government action back in 2015 where it signed an unusual kind of an agreement in the wake of a federal investigation on money laundering and other charges. It signed a settlement agreement. Wasn't a prosecutorial agreement, a deferred prosecution agreement or a plea agreement, but it was It's just a settlement agreement. But if you read it, it read very much like a deferred prosecution or even a plea agreement might read, in that there were a number of commitments and another number of acknowledgments of things that had happened. But it was prosecuted at the time. This case was brought in the context of the money transmitter rules and the FinCEN rules regulating money service businesses. Never really a discussion of securities. And it's important to note that in the agreement, there was a provision, like often you'll see in these agreements, that said doesn't preclude any other agency, any other governmental entity bringing action. So there's a lot of discussion for a long time between Ripple and the SEC on whether Ripple itself, XRP, was a security. Or is a security. That's actually an important term. Is it a security? The SEC back in 2018, through one of its top staffers, made the declaration, and this is hotly contested in the Ripple case, but made the comment that Bitcoin is not a security. And also said that Ether, as it existed, and this is 2018 timeframe, is not a security. But it was as of that date and time. Never cleared Ether when it was originally launched, when the Ethereum blockchain was launched, did not clear Ether as being a security then. So what's been the issue here? And I'll keep it quite simple, because it's actually over a 100-page complaint that the SEC filed in the federal courts. And what's really at issue here is the way Ripple was created, or the XRP, the token, and the way it was held in the corporate treasury, and the way it was used over time was the way a company uses a security. It was used for compensation. It was used for doing deals, for whatever it might be. And the SEC complaint, very well researched, well documented. As I said, it's over 100 pages long. It's a fascinating read if you ever want to have an idea of how the SEC builds a case as to whether something is a security. But this case has now been in the federal courts for over a year. There's been a lot of back and forth. We have communities that are, well, we have the Bitcoin maximalists, and I imagine there are a few of you here in this room, but there are also Ripple maximalists. But this is still out there, and to be honest with you, I think as this case goes, I think the SEC is sitting on a number of other cases that have the same kind of issue underlying it, and where probably the potential plaintiffs in or defendants in those cases have signed statute of limitations waivers. Because guess what, if you count, 2017, when a lot of these ICOs happened, it's 2018, 19, 20, 21, 22. Whoa, that's 5 years. Statute of limitations is about to run on a bunch of these. So the question is, you know, how big is their file of statute of limitation waivers that they have sitting there, all sort of timed off of what's going to happen with this case. So it's an important case. It's going to be a watershed. It may or may not go to the Supreme Court, but it's certainly worth watching. So I said I would mention DAOs real quickly. You know, DAOs are, you know, if you're looking at what the big issues are going to be in 2022, clearly DeFi. DeFis and NFTs, I think, probably are vying for the top space. But DAOs are just bursting out all over. The first statement of the SEC with respect to tokens in 2017, which started to cool the ICO market off, was actually in the context of an ICO, or I'm sorry, of a DAO. And that's what I have here, is this is the 2017 case. Fast forward to earlier this year. There we go. Oops. That time it went too quickly. We saw another case brought. And the bottom line is, remember I said at the beginning, function is how we regulate? It's really looking at what's going on inside of that DAO and looking at what that token that's associated with the DAO is doing. That will tell us what set of laws and regulations that we have to deal with. And we go back to that. If it walks like a dog, or walks like a duck, talks like a duck, quacks like quacks like a duck, that's probably a duck. I know it's not an answer that a lot of people want to hear, but it's something. It's an analysis that they need to go through. And on that note, I don't know. Did any of you invest in the Constitution DAO? Wanted to become a part owner of that? Or part owner in the entity, or I guess I'm not even sure we can say it was the entity that owned the DAO that would own, I guess, the last standing in the private arena a copy of the Constitution. Well, this was an interesting case because I think they raised $40+ million to do it. The first reports, it was an auction that was conducted very publicly. First reports went out that said that they had won. And it was sort of like the Dewey beats Truman headlines, because 15 minutes later, it came out that the DAO didn't win. And I think it was the founder of the Citadel hedge fund that did. But it shows you had people come together in basically the course of the weekend to raise $44 million, whatever it was. Some interesting issues on the backside. When they didn't win, what did they do with the money that they raised? Well, they decided to give it back. But they had so many small participants in it that by the time they paid the gas fees to return the cryptocurrency that had been sent to them for the purchase price, it ate up a lot of the contribution made by I don't know, something like 2,000 or so people. So again, I'm flagging these things because these are the issues we're going to be wrestling with in the coming days. I wanted to highlight a couple of other things for you, because the securities laws, we often think of the securities and the SEC and the CFTC together, because in a lot of jurisdictions around the world, the issues that each one of them individually deals with are often handled in a single government entity. But we've seen over the years, the CFTC has come forward with some pronouncements on different points. But most recently, they started tackling the issue of the exchanges, and whether the exchanges are dealing with types of instruments that are within the CFTC's jurisdiction. So I think that in last August, they took action against BitMEX. And as part of an action that involved the FinCEN, there was a $100 million settlement and an acknowledgement that the CFTC rules do apply and that the entity should have been registered as a future commission merchant. And I'll just give you a little footnote on that, and this is probably more minutia than you would like, but it's a really important piece that I don't think enough attention has been given to, is by moving BitMEX and the next one, which is Kraken, which settled not too long thereafter at a much lower price point, that by moving them into that category and away from, remember I said money service businesses, the way we regulate cryptocurrency exchanges or had historically, is where you've got a change in the AML compliance regime that applies. And what that means is a change in the KYC, know your customer standard, and the amount of information that's collected. So as these companies, those end up qualifying in a piece of that world, if they haven't been collecting full KYC like your bank does from day one, no matter what the size of your transaction is, they're actually in violation of that law, and they're in violation from the day that they start that business. So this is really, a sort of a game changer. We've seen the exchanges up their game significantly on the amount of customer information they're collecting, but this is definitely a change. And I should note that the way we have our laws, remember I said we're all functional here, the way we administer our Bank Secrecy Act, our anti-money laundering compliance regime, it's done in a functional kind of a way. So the CFTC is the one responsible for this piece of the world, the SEC for the broker-dealers, and the bank regulators for the banks. And then if you're not there, then we've got a combination of some other folks. So let's go to decentralized exchanges, and I want to be mindful of the time here. We're coming up against the wall here. But decentralized exchanges, I was actually, right before I came here today, I was in a meeting. I had a couple representatives of the US Treasury Department speaking. And they said that a lot more, they used to get a lot of questions on peer-to-peer transactions and stable coins, and now their questions are coming with respect to DEXs, as we call them. So what are these exchanges? Has anyone traded on one of these exchanges? Okay, it's pretty easy, isn't it, to do so? And you're not really sort of dealing with an intermediary there. It really becomes sort of a peer-to-peer type transaction that you're engaging in. You can just start to think that when you take, decentralized is just what it is. You're taking the there out of the equation. And from a regulatory perspective, who is going to be responsible for enforcing the laws then? I'm sorry, I didn't. Does someone have a comment to make? Okay, well, I put that out there because we're at the beginning stages of these issues being worked out. Now, having said that, the SEC has been pretty clear, I think, through the current chairman, and I think maybe even the past chairman, is that they don't really believe that there's really, much real decentralized activity happening. There's still a there. There's an entity that is writing the code, is putting up the website, is making money off of the transactions that are happening. So again, this is one of the biggest challenges. It's facing securities regulations and facing anti-money laundering compliance. I'll let you sort of delve into these slides. But as we move forward in the world of DeFi, so now we've got decentralized exchanges which are helping take us into this world of DeFi. So what is DeFi? It's decentralized finance. Well, what does that mean? Well, we're seeing it in the lending world. You can do a DeFi loan, and it can be structured in multiple different kinds of ways. But the bottom line is you can become a direct lender, or you can participate in a pool that's a direct lender. And no longer are you just depositing your money in a bank and then the bank's turning around and being the lender. You're actually playing a much more active role, and you're seeing more of the return from it. But DeFi doesn't stop there. DeFi can go into the insurance world. DeFi is definitely into the world of helping people earn more on their investments, on their crypto portfolio. Some of the APYs are quite astounding that you can get in terms of the yields that you can earn by going into DeFi and earning other kinds of tokens. I saw one a couple weeks ago, 400,000% APY. I think that one did crash a little bit after that. But there's a whole process of these, we're bringing different pieces of the technology together and melding them in different kinds of ways that are allowing all of us to become much more active participants in the allocation of resources. And with that comes the kind of challenges that face the regulators, because as I said, that I just go back to that state securities regulator commissioner, and he said, when the music stops, they're going to come complaining to me, and I'm going to be held responsible. So do they get ahead of it? Do they let the technology continue to develop and they do the cleanup on the backside? You have to think about that from your own personal perspective. Where do you want them? It's great to say we don't want the government in our business, but can everyone protect themselves equally? And these, again, it's fascinating. I was doing an AML compliance panel back a couple months ago, and someone said, how do you possibly keep up with all the changes in the technology? And I said, you either are a Gen Zer or you have to hire a Gen Zer. So I thank the Gen Zer on my team who was able to put together, pull some of these slides that are very interesting and things that you can look at in more detail. They're much too small for us to go, but they give you an idea of what's going on. So I want to close out with the non-fungible tokens. They're bursting out in all areas. Some of the biggest plays we've seen are primarily in the area of collectibles and art, whether it's visual or it's performing arts or combined. And there's some incredibly exciting things, and this technology couldn't have come along at a better time because you had a lot of artists that were literally starving. You know, having been out of work, out of galleries, out of concert halls or venues for, you know, a year or so, and then early last year, I don't know how many of you have been in Clubhouse. I got myself into Clubhouse, and it was quite of an experience, but to listen to the stories of these artists that, you know, they hadn't had access to be able to sell either their visual art or their performing art. And you start talking and they, you know, you realize what the intermediaries take from them in their process and how much of an actual transaction they end up seeing. And suddenly you've got technology that can deal with those questions. And that's what's so exciting about non-fungible tokens. Clearly the NFTs burst out with Top Shots, using it in the sports arena. We're seeing it in the games, virtual gaming. 2022 is definitely going to be the year or the beginning year of the metaverse. Maybe not the beginning year, but definitely the year of the metaverse. And we're seeing all sorts of applications there. It's incredibly exciting technology, but at the same time, we've got creative people, and they're learning how to use the NFTs in much the same way that they've used tokens otherwise for creating or raising value. And so we see people selling NFTs that are fractionalized. We see them, well, there's fractional art, break down the art, but we're break down the real estate, break down whatever the asset is and sell it to a lot of people. Well, what is that you have? You probably have a security. You know, you have to be very careful if it's not a security. Just one situation, this is, yeah, now you can, the NFTs in golf. You can buy part of a golf course, buy your right to get into other golf courses around the world, and lots of other experience. A lot of it's about creating community. But with this, we're introducing another realm of challenges. I think the best thing that I can say is, while this is incredibly exciting, one has to have knowledgeable legal advice near them, and you have to not be afraid to take that advice. And on the other hand, don't just shop for the advice and get the one that'll tell you what you want to hear, because that's a lot of what happened in 2017. And that's why a lot of people ended up spending a lot of money with respect to the dealing with the SEC on the backside. So I'm going to leave you with this. First of all, crypto Twitter exists. Crypto Twitter is a real thing. Crypto Twitter is where you do find out what's going on, and it is minute by minute. And if you're off crypto Twitter for a day or for a weekend, definitely, you've lost a year. I probably spent more time in crypto Twitter than I should, but there's one situation that hit my radar screen a couple weeks ago. And it says vested tokens locked with tradable NFTs are going to be hot. I guess I thought it was hot. But bottom line is, it's sort of an exploding NFT. They take an NFT, the technology, you know, this non-fungible token, and embed inside that NFT in the smart contract another token that's an ERC20 that then when you're ready, basically explodes and you can issue as much of those tokens as you want to off the ERC20. Now tell me, is that a security? Is that a derivative? Is that a future? Or, because of the world I live in, I look at that, are you now a money transmitter, issuer of digital currency? I did, and what you can't see here on the tweet, well, I've just advanced to, yeah, the tweet, the slide right before that. I did tweet it out. I was trying to find a nice, graceful way to, you know, raise some questions on this issue, and I decided the best way to do it is securities law professors. Here's a final exam question for you to get for your students. And this particular tweet was like a series of 6 steps, perfect for a law school exam question. But that's where we are, that's where we're looking and we're dealing. And if we can go ahead to the next 2 slides, So this one, I just wanted to say that we're in real time. As I said, crypto Twitter is real. There are things that came out today from the SEC. People are reacting immediately on it. You do need to have an appropriate filter and learn the right people to follow on it. But it's a great way to enhance your learning process in this area. So we've covered a lot of things. I appreciate your time and your attention, and good luck with the rest of the conference. Thank you.